Do you ever notice how the most linguistically advanced droid in cinema history is also a complete nervous wreck? We're going to talk about it. AI versus EI Droid Edition, where we rate the emotional intelligence of different artificial intelligence. Today's topic, C-3PO, one of my favorite characters in the Star Wars universe. And it's easy to understand why we're going to call him out as it relates to emotional intelligence. He's probably arguably the most emotional droid that we see in the series. We're going to score him against our logiCALMind framework, which has 3 distinct phases: stabilize, optimize, and execute. First up is phase 1. Phase 1 is all about stability, right? We want to stabilize your hardware or your biology. It's really emotional regulation and some emotional expression. So we're going to rate C-3PO on how well he emotionally expresses or regulates himself, or how well he doesn't. So C-3PO is fluent in over 7 million forms of communication, yet its baseline system is in a constant state of panic. So C-3PO usually fails at phase 1. He is a constant panicker, right? You countless scenes of him running around, raising his arms. Oh my gosh, what are we doing? For example, when they're on the Millennium Falcon heading right into that asteroid field, what does C-3PO do? Panics, complete dysregulation, no concept of being able to calm and stabilize his own biology, which makes him like panic, throw out these doom-inducing or fear-inducing statistics, right? The odds are 3,720 to 1, which stating those odds is not going to help anything. And immediately Han Solo replies, "Never tell me the odds," right? So not a good example of his own emotional regulation, but we know he actually can stabilize, or at least he learns how to. On the planet Kijimi, when he has to make the decision to wipe his memory in order to save the mission, he pauses. He doesn't flail. He doesn't react. He pauses and looks and says something along the lines of, I'm taking a second for one last look at my friends, right? It's a very grounded, emotionally regulated response to the experience he's about to have. So there is evidence to say he knows how to do it, or at least maybe he's learned how to do it, maybe highlighting a character arc of his own. But because the majority of the time he tends to be more panic focused or panic induced, for his phase 1 score, we are going to give him a 2. Now a 10 on this score would be completely well regulated and self-aware in both his emotional regulation and his emotional expression. That's all part of phase 1 of the logiCALMind framework, which leads us on to phase 2, which is optimize. Optimize is all about the cognition, right? It's moving into the logic piece of the framework where we have our brain turned back on and now we're analyzing everything that's going on and everything that happened. It really is emotional self-awareness. So where does C-3PO fit on phase 2? So while C-3PO does show that he has emotions, or at least he expresses them in some ways, he's not very good at really diving into what they are or where they're coming from. For example, on Tatooine, when he's in the desert with R2-D2 and they're bickering at each other, he's expressing emotions, expressing frustration at R2-D2, and they end up, splitting and going off into different directions. But what does C-3PO do is he externalizes the blame for the situation they're in. He tries to find fault and a reason other than anything to do with him of why he is where he is, ultimately blaming R2-D2 for getting him into that situation. Now, right or wrong, whether it was R2-D2's fault or not, I'll leave that up to you, but it's the inability for him to not actually take a second and do some introspection, some self-awareness, to understand where those frustrated feelings are coming from. Highly technical people do this all the time. We're really quick to try to outthink our emotions and try to blame them on external variables, when really what we should be doing is some introspection and actually looking into what's actually triggering us and why. Where is it coming from? All right, so for optimization phase 2 score, we are going to give him a 4, which moves us into phase 3, execute. This is how we interact with other people, our social awareness, our social regulation. How well do we express ourselves to other people, and how well do we understand and accurately identify other people's emotions and expressions as it relates to communicating with us. C-3PO excels here. This is where that 7 million communication methods really shines. So for example, when he's walking by and seeing Chewbacca lose at chess to R2-D2, and he recognizes the tension and the frustration in Chewbacca's voice, and he says to R2-D2, "Just let the Wookiee win." In that moment, he's recognizing the emotional reaction of another being and understanding what he needs to do to de-escalate that situation. So his finest hour is actually on Endor, when he's captured by this hostile army, right? He doesn't dive into this boring lecture trying to describe or explain away the situation. He recognizes, or he reads the room and sees that what he actually needs to communicate well here is more dramatic sound effects, like a mythical story. And he goes into this amazing storytelling mode to really connect with the audience. He really taps into that human empathy, or Ewok empathy in that situation. But he doesn't go just raw data. He actually taps in and he recognizes what is needed and adapts to the room. So C-3PO for phase 3, we're going to give him a score of 9 out of 10. He did really good in this space. That gives us a total of 15 out of 30. Not too great, not too bad, right smack dab in the middle, maybe where we'd expect an artificial intelligence to lay on that emotional intelligence standpoint. Who's your favorite droid? Which one should I do next? I've got a list that I'm going to go through, but if there's any of those that you think I really need to hit, throw them out there. We'll rank them and rate them and see where they fit. If any of these characteristics that we talked about sound familiar, maybe you see these in yourself, this is where I can help out. Drop me a message if you want to book an executive briefing for your team, or check out my website for the next virtual workshop. We've got one starting on July 1st. I'd love to see you there. Thanks for watching.